Hey everyone, welcome to Penny's Mind Files Method, the podcast showing you where the off ramp to the healing highway is when you're stuck on the life sucks road to nowhere. Today we're talking about memories, mind files, and expectations. Take a moment and think about your earliest memory. Can you recall experiences from when you were 2 or 3 without looking at pictures that somebody took, like your parents or a family member, a family friend, or whoever, that remind you of the experience? Sometimes your mind process gets confused between a mind file that you created and one that was given to you. If your mind's process determined a story was relevant to you somehow or meaningful to you, and it was one that somebody gave to you, it's corrupted because it's not entirely yours. The narrative that you accepted and copied was already influenced by somebody else who may or may not have resolved the negative energy mind files or their fear files, right? So, whoever gave you that memory created a narrative and attached the emotions that they considered appropriate to that experience, but then they passed that entire package on to you. That's the thing with memories, right? They're not always ours. But if our mind's process references them often enough, then we eventually come to believe that they are ours. We adopt that memory as our own and we create a mind file for it. Now, this isn't weird because we adopt narratives all the time. Ideas and supposed facts are given to us for years at school. I'm not talking about instructional learning like learning how to read and write and do math. I'm talking about subjects where it's ideas. And these ideas are accepted by so many people that they're assumed to be facts. But there's no such thing as a fact. Facts are ideas, they're opinions, and they change when new information becomes available. The thing is, most people never take the time to revisit the facts that they adopted and wrote into a mind file. That's what school is. It's somebody's passing on an idea to you. You learn to adopt ideas through school. The difference is school almost always sells you the idea as it's a stone, written in stone fact, and there's no such thing. Teachers are seen as these authority figures. Well, they know, and challenging authority is a no-no when you're a kid. We're going to do an entire episode about challenging authority, but for now, just consider when you're a little kid, what happens when you challenge authority? Depending on who the authority is, well, it doesn't really end well. It depends on how you challenge it, of course, but it doesn't usually end well for the challenger. And as you get older, you're going to learn that people who enjoy having power over others, they always present themselves as some kind of expert or authority on something. Facts are temporary. They change when new information becomes available. And you know what? There's millions of people in this world who are really curious and always searching for new information. They love the discovery of it. That's their passion. Now, most of the ideas given to you in school get written in a neutral file because neutral files are where we assess the information in them to be kind of useless. Like, why do we need this? We don't need to know this. It's just data, it's raw data. But unless, of course, you choose to use those ideas in a way that benefits you, like in a job. Okay, expectations. Remember in episode 2, when I talked about the mind's process and how the mind files were formed, I said that an expectation is created the third time you have a similar experience. Now, the only mind files, remember, the only ones that create blocks in your life are the dominant mind files, which means that you have expectations associated with those dominant mind files. Your expectations are then also dominant expectations. Let's look at some examples and see if this helps you to understand this. What about let's look at birthdays. So everybody has a birthday. Now, of course, not every family celebrates them. Most people do to some extent. I mean, there's some kind of recognition. Think about how old you were when you remember having a birthday. Not a memory that was given to you, but that your earliest memory where you remember everything. Is that mindful a dominant mindful? For example, in my house, our birthday celebrations were always on the weekend, closest to the date. We didn't have birthday parties in my house, like with classmates from school or anything like that. It was only just family. So, my mind file that I have associated with birthdays says every year on my birthday, I get a present, and my mom asks me what kind of cake I want, and then she'll make that cake. Every birthday is different. Sometimes I chose chocolate cake, and sometimes I chose strawberry shortcake. Sometimes I chose cheesecake. But that's the extent of the mind files in my cabinet that have to do with birthdays. It's definitely not a dominant mind file because there aren't any big emotions tied to it. Now, some of that for me, I think, when I reassessed all this, had to do with every Sunday we had, some kind of bigger supper because there was more time to cook supper. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to, right? You had meals that were longer to make. So, you have the big roast beef dinner or roast chicken dinner or whatever. And we didn't always have dessert, but on our birthday, it was guaranteed. So the expectation that I had was that I would get a present, I would get something, some kind of recognition, and I would get to choose what kind of cake I wanted. That's it. Now, maybe you had big parties on your birthday and you had parties where you invited kids from your class at school or your neighborhood, your friends in your neighborhood. Everybody brings you a present and you had some kind of kid meal like hot dogs and hamburgers or pizza or whatever, and then whatever your choice of cake was. So, common emotions attached to those kinds of mind files are happy, enthusiastic, joyful, excited, prized, and valued, those kinds of things, right? Those are high frequency feelings. And so, by the third party, your mind file is well on its way to becoming a dominant mind file. You had a expectation by the third big party that you had. There was an expectation that there would be a party, that you would get lots of presents, do fun things, and get to have your favorite foods and cake. If you were lucky, you continued to have these parties for several years. And if you're really lucky, it became a tradition, these big parties carried on throughout your young adult life. But then what happens when the expectation of a big party with lots of friends and gifts and great food isn't met? The disappointment you feel will be relative to the number of positive emotions attached to that file. So let's say you had big parties like that for 35 years. And then on your 36th birthday, something happened and nada, nothing. No party, no dinner, no nothing. The disappointment that you feel will be equivalent to 35 years of positive emotion. Only it's one massive negative filter the size of all of those positive ones that collected for 35 years. I mean, there could be, who knows, hundreds, thousands of emotional filters in that mind file. That kind of disappointment creates a bunch of other mind files because somebody is getting blamed for that massive disappointment. Either a friend or a family member or a partner, a spouse, somebody, or multiple somebodies are going to get blamed for your disappointment. The mind files that you create out of this one disappointment. Now, notice here I said mind files with an S, because the number of narratives that your mind's process will create as a result of that one disappointment, well, who knows how many that could be. We can assume, though, that they will outnumber the narratives in the initial mind file because pain's always bigger. Dominant mind files create dominant wounds. So a file that started out in your love cabinet has now become a dominant file in your fear cabinet. Let's look at another example. Think of a time when you were comforted by a parent or some other caregiver. Maybe you fell and you hurt yourself, you scraped your knee and it was bleeding, or maybe you were sick, you had the flu, or something. You needed nurturing and comfort. Now, nurturing is the act of transferring positive, loving energy to another. It's a high frequency energy. And sadly, not everybody got to experience that in their childhood. Way back at some point in your early life somewhere, though, somebody hugged you or held you when you were hurting, either physically or emotionally. And it felt good. It felt safe. You felt cared for and loved. How old were you? By the third time you were comforted, after experiencing whatever it was, stressful, you were on your way to creating a dominant mind file, because positive feelings are high frequency energy, and that's what we want. These are feelings like being soothed and feeling safe and comfortable, peaceful, but accepted and loved, protected, valued, treasured, understood. All of those things are really high frequency feelings. Now, how many times do you think that an experience like that has to happen before it becomes a dominant mind file? Not too many, because those emotions feel really good. Now, some people grew up in homes where their parents weren't nurturing. Instead, maybe they were distant or detached from their positive feelings, so they couldn't pass them on, right? We can't give away what we don't possess. So those kids grew up in homes where their basic needs were met. Now, if that was you, your expectation surrounding love and comfort is just having your basic needs met, which means that your idea of what it means to be loved is very different than somebody who grew up with a parent or parents who were nurturing. Those of us who experience nurturing have an expectation about what love feels like because we felt that energy transference. For us, the mind file we created, who knows how young we were, says something like, whenever I'm hurting, my mom or my dad loves me and it feels good. Now think about how often a child experiences needs, hungry, or you have a wet diaper. That's a need, a biological, physiological, and emotional need, right? So the initial mind file that talks about being loved is ultimately having a need met. And even though you're not consciously aware, there is one there, and it'll have hundreds, maybe thousands of emotional filters into it. There's an expectation of what being loved means. For people who experience nurturing, that includes a positive energy transference. You expect that to happen. But for the people who didn't have the nurturing parents and just had their basic needs met, well, their expectation is going to be connected to things, material things. So their idea of being loved is associated with accumulating material things. Much of what we believe about the world and ourselves is shaped by our childhood interpretations. Now, some of those mind files are going to be sources of joy, but many will be sources of our deepest wounds. Understanding this entire process gives us the power to revisit and rewrite the narratives that no longer serve us. by recognizing which memories and expectations are truly ours, not ones that were given to us, but ones that we developed, we can begin then to heal, challenge those outdated assumptions, and then create new mind files rooted in curiosity, compassion, and self awareness. Ultimately, personal growth and personal empowerment lie in our willingness to question these ideas and facts that we've accepted, embracing change, and nurturing ourselves with positive energy. This gives us an opportunity to transform those big disappointments into wisdom, and our expectations then into possibility. The off ramp to the healing highway is always there, waiting for us to choose a new direction, one mind file at a time. That's it for today. Stay curious, and remember, when you're kind to yourself, you're kind to others. And hey, join the conversation. Let me know what you think. Reach out with a comment or even a criticism. Okay, we'll see you next time.